The blood-soaked bandana tied around Quinn Galloway's arm did nothing to hide the crimson river flowing freely down his sleeve as he stumbled through the doors of Katherine Kelly's small apothecary shop on the dusty main street of Newton, Colorado. It was 1879, and the town was barely more than a collection of weathered buildings fighting to exist against the harsh mountain landscape. Katherine looked up from her mortar and pestle, her honey-blonde hair falling from its pins as her eyes widened at the sight of the wounded stranger. "Sweet mercy," she gasped, abandoning her herbs to rush toward him. "What happened to you?" Quinn's hat fell to the floor as he collapsed against her counter. His breathing labored. "Ambushed. 5 miles east," he managed through gritted teeth. "Horse through me. Walked the rest." Katherine's skilled hands were already moving, guiding him to the back room where she treated patients too poor to afford the town doctor. As a woman running her own business in a town that barely tolerated her independence, she'd learned medicine by necessity rather than formal training. "Sit," she commanded, helping him onto her examining table. She cut away his sleeve with practiced efficiency, revealing a deep gash that ran from his shoulder to elbow. "Knife wound. Bullet grazed me," he corrected, wincing as she began to clean the wound. "They were aiming for my heart." "Well, they missed," she said briskly, trying not to notice his striking blue eyes or the way his dark hair curled damply at his temples. "Though from the look of this, you've lost enough blood to worry me." As she worked, Katherine noticed other wounds, older scars that told stories of a hard life lived. But more concerning was the fresh bruising across his ribs and the way he favored his left side. When she pressed gently against his ribcage, he nearly jumped off the table. "You're hurt worse than just the arm," she observed, reaching for more bandages. "You've got a cut above your eye too," he countered, surprising her as his calloused fingertip hovered near a small wound on her forehead she'd received that morning while gathering herbs. "I'm fine," she dismissed. "You're hurt worse than me." The cowboy's lips curved into an unexpected smile, his eyes holding hers with surprising tenderness despite his pain. "Then we'll heal each other slow." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks as she turned away to retrieve her needle and thread. "You'll need stitches, Mr. Galloway." "Quinn Galloway. But most folks just call me Quinn." "I'm Katherine Kelly. Most folks call me Miss Kelly, though some call me the witch woman," she added with a hint of bitterness. "Depends on whether they need my remedies or not." "Pleased to meet you, Katherine," he said, ignoring convention with a directness that both surprised and oddly pleased her. "Though I wish it were under better circumstances." As she threaded her needle, she studied him more carefully. Unlike most cowboys who drifted through Newton, Quinn Galloway carried himself with a quiet dignity despite his injuries. His clothes, though worn and now bloodied, were of good quality. "What brings you to Newton, Mr. Galloway? Besides getting shot at, that is." His expression darkened. "Business. The kind that apparently makes some folk nervous," he hissed as she began stitching his wound. "I came to claim what's mine, my father's ranch, the Running G. Been trying to get back for 5 years. Katherine's hands stilled. "The Running G belongs to Harold Blackwood now." Quinn's jaw tightened. "Illegally. My father didn't sell it before he died. The deed is still in our family name." "Mr. Blackwood doesn't take kindly to challenges," she warned, continuing her careful stitching. "He owns half the county and most of the men with badges." "I noticed," Quinn said grimly. "Those weren't ordinary bandits who ambushed me. They knew who I was and what papers I was carrying." Katherine tied off the last stitch and began wrapping clean bandages around his arm. "You should leave town, Mr. Galloway. Once Blackwood sets his sights on someone, they tend to end up buried on Boot Hill." "Not planning on dying just yet," Quinn replied, his eyes never leaving her face. "Especially now that I've found someone worth staying alive for." The boldness of his statement made her pulse quicken, but Katherine had learned long ago that men's sweet words rarely matched their actions. "You've lost blood. It's making you delirious. Maybe," he conceded with a smile that transformed his rugged face. "Or maybe getting shot was the best thing that's happened to me in years." She finished bandaging his arm and moved to examine his ribs. "You'll need to rest. Those ribs might be cracked. I can't stay in town. Not safe. I have a small cabin, about a mile outside town, where I grow my herbs," she offered, surprising herself. "You could recover there. Why would you help a stranger?" His eyes narrowed with suspicion born of hard experience. Katherine hesitated, then admitted, "Blackwood tried to force me to sell my shop last month. Said a woman has no business running an apothecary. When I refused, my supplies started disappearing, and customers were warned away." Understanding dawned on Quinn's face. "The enemy of my enemy." "Something like that," she agreed, helping him to his feet. "Can you ride?" "I walked 5 miles with a bullet wound. I can manage a saddle." Katherine gathered her supplies and led him out the back door to where her mare was tethered. "We'll have to share. It'll be dark soon, and I don't want anyone seeing us leave together." The ride to Katherine's cabin was slow and painful for Quinn. Every hoofbeat sent shards of agony through his ribs, but having Katherine's warm body pressed against him as she guided the horse provided a different kind of distraction. The scent of lavender and herbs clung to her hair, and despite the circumstances, Quinn found himself noticing how perfectly she fit against him. Her cabin was nestled in a small clearing, surrounded by a meticulously tended garden of medicinal plants. Inside was simple but clean, with dried herbs hanging from the rafters and shelves lined with bottles and jars. "It's not much," she apologized, helping him to a chair. "It's perfect," Quinn replied honestly. After years of wandering, sleeping under stars or in crowded bunkhouses, the small cabin felt like luxury. Katherine busied herself lighting lamps and stoking the fire. "I'll make a tea for the pain and then check those ribs properly." As she worked, Quinn studied her, noticing how the lamplight caught the golden strands in her hair and the graceful efficiency of her movements. How did a proper lady end up running an apothecary in a town like Newton? She paused, weighing whether to answer. "My father was a doctor back east. He taught me everything he knew. When he and my mother died of influenza, I had nowhere to go. My uncle offered to take me in, but only if I—" She trailed off. "Well, let's just say his intentions weren't fatherly. So I took what money I had and headed west. And Newton? The stagecoach broke down here 4 years ago. While waiting for repairs, I helped deliver a baby and set a broken arm. Word spread, and suddenly I had a purpose." She handed him a steaming cup. "Drink. It will help." Quinn sipped the bitter brew, grimacing at the taste. "Do all your remedies taste like saddle leather?" A genuine smile lit up her face. "Only the effective ones." Over the next few days, Katherine tended Quinn's wounds with professional detachment, but she couldn't ignore the growing awareness between them. Each time her fingers brushed his skin, she felt an electric current that had nothing to do with medicine. Quinn respected her boundaries, never pushing for more than she offered, but his eyes followed her constantly. In the evenings, he told stories of his travels, of the years spent working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, of the mines in Colorado where he'd nearly died in a cave-in, of his determination to reclaim his family legacy. "My father built that ranch from nothing," he explained on the third night as they sat before the fire. His strength was returning, and he'd insisted on chopping wood that afternoon despite her protests. He was a good man who treated everyone fairly, his workers, the townspeople, even the Ute Indians who lived nearby. "What happened to him?" Katherine asked, passing him a bowl of stew. Quinn's expression darkened. I was away working a cattle drive. By the time I got the news and returned, he'd been buried for a month, and Blackwood was already living in our house. The sheriff claimed my father had gambling debts and sold the ranch to cover them. But you don't believe that. My father never gambled a day in his life, Quinn said firmly. And I have the original deed showing he still owned the property. I just need to get it to the circuit judge. Katherine stirred the fire thoughtfully. Judge Wilson comes through Newton next week for the quarterly court session. Hope flickered in Quinn's eyes. That's why I came now. If I can present my case to the judge. Blackwood will do everything to stop you, she warned. He's not a man who loses gracefully. I'm counting on it, Quinn replied grimly. I want him to face justice not just for stealing my land, but for what he did to my father. You think he... I know it, just can't prove it yet. That night, Katherine lay awake long after Quinn had fallen asleep on the pallet she'd made for him near the fire. His presence in her small cabin had changed something fundamental. For 4 years, she'd kept to herself, building walls around her heart as sturdy as those around her garden. Now this wounded cowboy had walked through those defenses as easily as he'd stumbled through her shop door. The next morning, Katherine woke to find Quinn already outside, his shirt off as he split logs with fluid efficiency despite his injuries. She paused in the doorway, mesmerized by the play of muscles across his back and shoulders. The bruising on his ribs had faded to yellows and greens, and her stitches in his arm were healing cleanly. He turned, sensing her presence, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Morning," he said simply, but the word carried weight. "You shouldn't be straining those stitches," she admonished, trying to maintain her professional demeanor. Quinn set the axe down and approached her, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "They're holding fine. Your needlework is as skillful as everything else about you." Katherine fought the urge to retreat. "I should check them just to be sure." Inside, her hands trembled slightly as she removed the bandage from his arm. The wound was healing well, the edges coming together cleanly. "Another few days and I can remove the stitches." "And then what?" Quinn asked softly. She looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "After I'm healed. After I see the judge." "What then, Katherine?" Her throat tightened. "Then you'll have your ranch back. You can rebuild your life." "A ranch needs more than just cattle and land," he said, his fingers gently lifting her chin. "It needs a heart." Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. Quinn instantly reached for the rifle he kept nearby, but Katherine placed a restraining hand on his arm. "It's just old Joe," she said, recognizing the distinctive gait of the elderly trapper's mule. "He comes by every week to trade herbs for pelts." But when she opened the door, old Joe's weathered face was grim. "Miss Kelly, you got trouble. Blackwood's men were at your shop this morning, tearing the place apart. They're looking for that cowboy who came to town a few days back." Katherine's heart raced. "Did they say why?" "Claim he killed one of their men during that ambush. Got a wanted poster with his face on it now." Joe looked past her to where Quinn stood. "You best get moving, son. They're checking every farm and homestead within 10 miles. Quinn's expression hardened. "This is Blackwood's doing. There was no murder. I defended myself against bushwhackers." "Truth don't matter much against a rich man's word," Joe said philosophically. "I can lead them on a false trail north if you're heading another direction." "We appreciate that, Joe," Katherine said, making a quick decision. "Can you deliver a message to Judge Wilson when he arrives? Tell him to meet us at Widow Parker's place on Cedar Creek." After Joe departed, Katherine moved with purposeful efficiency, gathering supplies and medicines. "Esther Parker was one of my first patients here. Her place is hidden in a box canyon about 15 miles south. Blackwood's men won't think to look there. Quinn caught her arm gently. Katherine, this isn't your fight. I can't ask you to risk everything. You didn't ask, she replied firmly. And it became my fight the moment Blackwood targeted my business. She hesitated, then added more softly. And perhaps the moment a bleeding cowboy stumbled into my shop. The journey to Widow Parker's homestead took them through rough country, forcing them to travel slowly and cautiously. Twice they spotted riders in the distance and had to hide until the danger passed. By nightfall, they were still several miles from their destination. We should make camp, Quinn suggested, eyeing the darkening sky. Too dangerous to keep going in the dark. Katherine agreed, and they found a sheltered spot beneath a rocky overhang. As Quinn built a small, smokeless fire, Katherine prepared a simple meal from their provisions. The intimacy of sharing the small space, of working together in the gathering darkness, heightened the awareness between them. Tell me about your dreams, Quinn said suddenly as they sat side by side, watching the flames. Before all this, what did you want from life? The question caught Katherine off guard. No one had asked about her dreams in years. I wanted to be a real doctor, she admitted. Not just an apothecary. I wanted to study medicine formally, but there are so few schools that accept women. You'd make a fine doctor, Quinn said with conviction. You have healing hands. What about you? She asked. Was the ranch always your dream? Quinn was quiet for a moment. The ranch is my heritage, my responsibility, but my dream. He looked at her, the firelight dancing in his eyes. My dream was always to find somewhere I belong, someone to belong to. The air between them crackled with unspoken feelings. Katherine felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by a force as inevitable as gravity. When their lips met, it was gentle at first, a question, an offering. Then Quinn's arms enfolded her, and the kiss deepened into something that awakened parts of her soul long dormant. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Katherine rested her forehead against his. I shouldn't have done that. Why not? Quinn's voice was husky. Because when this is over, you'll have your ranch and I'll have my shop, and we'll go back to our separate lives. Quinn's hand came up to cup her cheek. What if I don't want separate lives anymore? What if I want to build something new together? Before she could answer, a sound in the darkness froze them both, the unmistakable click of a rifle being cocked. Ain't that sweet? Drawled a voice from the shadows. Lovebirds nesting. 3 men emerged into the firelight, guns trained on them. Katherine recognized Blackwood's foreman, Silas Turner, a man known for his cruelty. You've led us on quite a chase, Galloway, Turner said, his thin lips twisted in a sneer. Mr. Blackwood wants a word with you about those false claims you're making. Quinn slowly rose to his feet, positioning himself between Katherine and the gunman. The only false claims are the ones Blackwood made when he stole my father's property. Turner spat into the fire. Your pa was a fool who didn't know when to shut his mouth. Just like you. He gestured with his gun. Get up, both of you. We're taking a little ride. Katherine's mind raced as she gathered her shawl. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But she knew these hills better than Blackwood's men. If they could create a distraction. As if reading her thoughts, Quinn caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod toward her saddlebag, where she kept a small bottle of volatile oil she used for treating chest congestion. The oil was highly flammable, a fact Quinn had learned when he'd accidentally knocked some into the fire days earlier, causing a bright flare. I need my medicine, Katherine said, moving toward her bag. I have a condition. Make it quick, Turner snapped. With deliberate clumsiness, Katherine fumbled with the bag, extracting the small bottle. As she pretended to drink from it, she palmed the cork. When Turner looked away momentarily to speak to one of his men, She flung the contents toward the fire. The resulting explosion was more spectacular than she'd anticipated. Flames leapt 6 feet high, and in the confusion, Quinn lunged for Turner, wrestling him to the ground. Katherine grabbed a rock and struck one of the other men across the temple, dropping him instantly. The third man fired wildly, the bullet whizzing past Katherine's ear. She rolled behind a boulder as Quinn and Turner continued their desperate struggle. Quinn was still recovering from his injuries, and Turner was both heavier and uninjured. For a terrifying moment, it seemed Turner had the upper hand as he pressed his forearm against Quinn's throat. Katherine looked frantically for a weapon and spotted Turner's dropped revolver. She'd never fired a gun in her life, but she grabbed it anyway, pointing it with shaking hands. "Let him go," she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Turner laughed. "You won't shoot, lady. You're a healer, not a killer." Katherine adjusted her grip. "I prefer healing to harming, it's true. But make no mistake, I'll put a bullet in you before I'll let you kill him." Something in her eyes must have convinced Turner she meant it, because his pressure on Quinn's throat eased slightly. That momentary hesitation was all Quinn needed. With a surge of strength, he threw Turner off and delivered a knockout blow. In the silence that followed, broken only by their ragged breathing, Quinn looked at Katherine with new respect. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." They worked quickly, binding the unconscious men and taking their weapons. "We can't stay here," Quinn said. "Once these 3 don't report back, Blackwood will send more men." "Widow Parker's is still our best option," Katherine insisted. "She has a root cellar that's well hidden. We can secure these men there until the judge arrives." They reached the widow's homestead just before dawn. Esther Parker, a sturdy woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and weathered hands, took in the situation with remarkable composure. "Always knew that Blackwood was the devil," she remarked as she helped them secure the prisoners in her root cellar. "Been waiting for someone to stand against him." Over the next 3 days, they settled into an uneasy vigilance. Quinn took watch from the roof of the small cabin, while Katherine helped Esther with her chores and tended to their prisoners. Despite the danger, there was a strange domestic tranquility to their temporary arrangement, sharing meals, working together, stealing quiet moments alone. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Quinn spotted riders approaching a small group led by a distinguished man in a black coat that Katherine identified as Judge Wilson. Beside him rode the county marshal, 2 deputies, and to their surprise, old Joe. "Told you I'd get word to the judge," Joe said proudly when they greeted the party. "Found him on the road to Newton and explained the whole situation." Judge Wilson, a stern man with intelligent eyes, listened carefully as Quinn presented his evidence: the original deed to the Running G Ranch, letters from his father discussing Blackwood's pressure tactics, and testimonies from Katherine and Esther about Blackwood's pattern of intimidation. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Galloway," the judge said finally. "But the evidence is compelling, especially in light of similar complaints I've received about Mr. Blackwood in recent months." The marshal, who had been questioning the captured men, approached gravely. "Turner's talking, Your Honor. Says Blackwood ordered them to ambush Galloway and destroy his proof of ownership. Also claims Blackwood arranged the accident that killed the senior Galloway 5 years ago." A heavy silence fell over the room. Quinn's face was a study in controlled emotion, grief, vindication, and the weight of justice long delayed. "Marshal," Judge Wilson said formally, "I believe you have sufficient cause to arrest Harold Blackwood. I'll issue the warrants immediately." 2 days later, Harold Blackwood was taken into custody at the Running G Ranch. The news spread through Newton like wildfire, and by the time Quinn and Katherine rode into town, people were already whispering about dramatic changes coming. Katherine surveyed the damage to her shop with dismay. Shelves had been overturned, precious medicines destroyed, windows broken. The work of 4 years lay in ruins around her. "I can rebuild," she said, more to herself than to Quinn, who stood beside her in the doorway. "It will take time, but I can start again." Quinn took her hand, his touch now familiar and essential. "Or you could start something new. With me." She turned to face him, searching his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you, Katherine Kelly. I think I've loved you since you stood over me with needle and thread, ordering me not to flinch." He smiled, the expression transforming his face. "The running G needs a mistress. It needs your healing hands and your brave heart. And if I want to pursue my dream of becoming a proper doctor," she challenged gently, "then we'll find a way to make that happen too," Quinn promised. "The ranch is 30 miles from Denver. There are medical schools there that are beginning to accept women. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is." Katherine thought of the lonely years she'd spent building her walls, of the safety she'd found in isolation. Then she thought of Quinn, his strength, his determination, the way he looked at her as if she were the answer to every question he'd ever asked. "You're proposing marriage, then?" she asked, needing to hear it clearly. Quinn dropped to one knee, oblivious to the curious townspeople gathering outside the damaged shop. "Katherine Kelly, will you marry me? Will you help me rebuild the running G and make it a place of healing and hope? Will you let me love you for the rest of our days?" Katherine felt tears well in her eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." Their wedding took place 3 months later on the porch of the newly restored main house at the running G. Judge Wilson officiated, and half the county attended, curious to see the young couple who had brought down Harold Blackwood. Old Joe served as Quinn's best man, while Widow Parker stood proudly beside Katherine. In the years that followed, the running G flourished under their joint stewardship. Quinn's knowledge of ranching combined with Katherine's healing skills created a haven not just for cattle, but for people in need. She established a small clinic that served the ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders, all while studying medicine through correspondence courses from a progressive school in Philadelphia. When their first child was born, a robust boy they named James after Quinn's father. Katherine delivered him herself with Quinn's steady assistance. 2 years later, their daughter Sarah arrived, inheriting her mother's golden hair and her father's determined blue eyes. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, Quinn wrapped his arm around Katherine's shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving up your independence for this life?" Katherine leaned into his embrace, watching their children play in the yard with the ranch dog. "I didn't give up independence," she corrected gently. "I chose partnership. There's a difference." Quinn brushed a kiss against her temple. "You know, when I stumbled into your shop that day, bleeding and half dead, I thought I'd reached the end of my road. And instead, it was just the beginning," Katherine finished for him, turning to meet his lips with hers. As twilight deepened around them, the sounds of the ranch settling for the night created a peaceful symphony, cattle lowing in the distance, hands singing around the bunkhouse fire, their children's laughter. From strangers bound by circumstance to partners bound by choice, their journey had been one of healing, not just of physical wounds, but of hearts long scarred by solitude. They had healed each other, slowly and thoroughly, creating in the process something neither had dared to dream possible. A home, a family, a love strong enough to withstand whatever storms life might bring. And in the wild, unpredictable lands of the Colorado Territory, such certainty was perhaps the greatest treasure of all.